are through in Lesson 1 of Module 1 in Assessment and Learning 2, the characteristic of 21st century assessment.
As we move on to the Lesson 2 of Module 1 in CPE106, Assessment in Learning 2, we will tackle the outcome-based assessment. This is Garciano&Tadena,
And this is Joyce Garciano,
and
we will be the reporters for today.
We will present to you our mind map as an overview for this video presentation. The topic that we will discuss is outcome-based assessment. We will present to you the 3 learning objectives, the definition of outcome-based assessment, and its 5 features.
We will also discuss about the comparison of traditional assessment and outcome-based assessment. And also, lastly, our learning outcomes. And these are the learning objectives of this lesson. At the end of the lesson, the students are expected to have a full understanding about the meaning and the features of objective-based assessment, differentiate the objective-based assessment from traditional assessment, and lastly, create an example of assessment that is outcome-based.
So now we will discuss the outcome-based assessment. So what is an outcome-based assessment? The Commission in Higher Education wants to meet the changing needs of the students. Thus, they have mandated a CHED Memorandum Order implementing the outcome-based education. The outcome-based education is the transforming of the educational landscape from being input-based learning to outcomes, real-world knowledge, and skills of learning. Using outcome-based education, or OBE, students are expected to perform successfully learning outcomes at the end of the instruction. This brings great opportunity for schools and educators to produce more graduates. Moreover, outcome-based assessment focuses on the assessment tasks to the intended learning outcomes set before the curricular enactment. It signifies the development and utilization of valid, fair, and reliable assessment in measuring students' learning. So that is the outcome-based assessment. So now let us proceed to the features of outcome-based assessment by Dagdag and Cardona 2018. Dagdag and Cardona claimed that in outcome-based education, the teachers or the educators use criterion assessment, while in traditional, the educators use the comparative assessment. So here are the 5 features of outcome-based assessment. So first, in outcome-based assessment, the curriculum and assessment must focus on the intended learning outcomes and not to the subject matter or content. Second, outcome-based assessment emphasizes the use of public assessment so that students understand if they can achieve the intended learning outcomes. And third, in outcome-based assessment, it is important to define the desired results and work backward to identify the building blocks that learners must achieve to reach the end outcomes.
Treat curriculum, instruction, and assessment as afterable or flexible means to achieve the end goals of education. And lastly, use student achievement at the end of the learning period as the final result of all prior student learning, not the average of all the results of the student's activity. And now, let's proceed in comparing the traditional education assessment and outcome-based education assessment. In traditional education assessment, the learners are passive, while in outcome-based education assessment, the learners are active. In traditional education assessment, the approach is exam-driven and the curriculum and syllabus is content-based, while in outcome-based assessment, critical thinking and reasoning is encouraged and content is relevant to real-life situations. In traditional education assessment, learning is teacher-centered and syllabus are rigid and non-negotiable, while in outcome-based assessment, learning is learner-centered and learning programs allow teachers to be innovative and creative. In traditional education assessment, teachers are responsible for learning, while in outcome-based education assessment, learners are responsible for their own learning.
So now let us proceed to our learning outcomes for this lesson. So in this lesson, we have learned about outcome-based assessment. So we have learned that in outcome-based assessment, it focuses more on the intended learning outcomes rather than to the subject matter or the content of the course. And it gives more emphasis to performance-based assessment rather than to pen and paper test, in which it allows the students to actively engage in the learning process. So in outcome-based assessment, the learning is learner-centered. The students are responsible for their own learning. Without outcome-based assessment, teachers cannot measure the extent of the learning performance of the students. And outcome-based assessment is a great way for the CHED or for the Commission on Higher Education to align itself to the global educational standards. Once again, this is Juliet
And Joyce, thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something. See you next lesson!